Okay, we are on video. Hello to the folks at home, and hello to everyone here. Nice to see everyone. This is our second of 3 installments. This is in fact January 21st. Here we are. Welcome. It was wonderful to have so many of you here 2 weeks ago. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of introductory material about Minyan, about our daily Minyan, and really got into a lot of the basics. Today, we're going to be jumping into Shacharit. We have a very ambitious agenda, so I invite everyone to fasten your seatbelts and get ready to go on hopefully a wonderful adventure through all of the Tefillot. And to do that, we're going to invite you to have gray Sidurim or maroon Sidurim.
Okay.
So we're going to send those around because I'd like you, if you like, you don't need the Sidurim, but you can follow along with these. And if you're watching at home, we did have 45 people watch the video, which is a lot of people because this isn't like, we don't have any tricks, there's no special effects. Luke Skywalker does not make an appearance. But we're going to try to do as many things connected to the Tefillah. You should also have your packets. If you accidentally forgot your packet, our wonderful TAs, Beth and Kathy, will be marking all of the final exams. They will be coming around with the syllabus and making sure that everyone is in the right place. So today, January 21st, Kathy's going to make a commercial announcement. If you want to be in the video...
That's okay. I can
Okay.
my sister's watching. She doesn't have to see me.
Say hi to your sister.
Hi, Wendy.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that everybody knows that they should sign in. If you already signed up or if you were here 2 weeks ago, your name's on the list. Just find it and check off today. Otherwise, please add your name to the bottom. The course outline is the first thing in your packet. And then the outline of the prayer service. Then the Amidah, and then finally the glossary. So if the rabbi mentions Hebrew phrases or words, you don't have to ferociously write them down. Most of them are in the glossary in the back. Beth, did I leave anything out?
No, this check-on sheet is getting repaired and is on its way.
And 2 weeks from now, make sure you bring your packets back.
And you'll get a reminder.
And it's a different time than 2 weeks.
It is a different time.
2 weeks from today is the Worldwide Wrap. It's one of the largest gatherings of putting on tefillin in the world. And we'll hopefully have a huge group here. So if you'd like to join in for that, that'll be in the main sanctuary from 8:30 to 9:45. We'll both learn about the mitzvah. Those who want to try it for the first time are very encouraged to do so. And then the brotherhood sponsors a breakfast. And so we delayed the class a little bit so that we can participate in all of that. Okay? Great. Let's jump into today's learning, which is Shacharit. Shacharit comes from the word Shachar. What does Shachar mean? Shachar means dawn. This was a service that was created, right, for someone who was waking up. How did you wake up in the ancient world? You heard the rooster crow. Light kind of flooded into your living space. You were very connected to nature. And a lot of the tefillot were actually written by people who were experiencing sunrise, which of course is the key moment of Shacharit. When we get to Mariv, I don't want to give away all the fun, but of course Mariv is connected to sunset and the end of the day. So Shacharit is the morning service. And what's interesting about it is that our rabbis and our tradition over thousands of years wanted us to have an experience that was different from our natural instinct. Right? We as human beings evolved to be in certain ways because we wanted to survive. And over millions of years, and over thousands of years more recently, we evolved in certain ways to protect ourselves. Right? The natural instinct of a human being is to make sure that we can survive, that we have enough to eat, that our own needs are met. Now what's interesting is Judaism says, okay, you should not take care of your own needs, but if that becomes the only thing you do, and you don't go beyond that, then what is the purpose to existence? Right? And so our tradition asks us that while we begin with ourselves, we're supposed to move beyond ourselves. And in fact, the Shacharit service is designed to help us step outside of that circle of just being focused on ourselves. And the tefillot, the prayers, take us on a journey about going beyond ourselves and being in connection with other people and thinking about how to be in this world. How can I be present for other people this morning, this day? How can I be more nurturing and more compassionate? And we'll see those values woven into the Shacharit service. Right? When many of us wake up, what's the first thing that we need to do?
Go to the bathroom.
Go to the bathroom. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. That's exactly what we need to do, right? Sometimes you might need a glass of water. You might, need to go back to sleep because you didn't get enough sleep. But we're by default always going to be focused on our own needs. Right? That's simply a given. And so what our tradition says is, how are we going to move beyond that? It's not that we shouldn't go to the bathroom and get dressed and eat and take care of our own needs. We should. But then we go beyond that and we start to think about how we can reach beyond. So we're going to see that this morning in the Shacharit service. I forgot to bring, one of the other things that I wanted to bring is my little siddur that I've used for the last 30 years, which has like notes in the margins. And I wanted to bring that. I'll do it in the last class so I can show you how I've tried to make the tefillot more a part of my own life. All right, let's jump into the morning service. I'm on page 2 of the outline. The first question is, how was the time chosen at Temple Emunah? So the time reflects the way we live our lives. So Shacharit on most weekday mornings is at 7 a.m., right? So that people can get to work and have time to have a Shacharit experience before setting off on their day. Since we're hoping that people don't work on Shabbat and on Sundays, right? We move the Shacharit time later. So it's 9:30 on Shabbat mornings, 9 o'clock on Sundays. We move it up 15 minutes on mornings where there are additions to the service. So for example, if it's a holiday when we recite Hallel, right, which is the Psalms of Praise, I'm taking a quick break to make sure that this is actually recording. Having one of those things. It is recording. Thank God. Whew. Okay. If it's a morning, back to the regular scheduled program. If it's a morning when we recite Hallel, right, Psalms of Praise like we do on Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month, and we have additions, then we move up the service 15 minutes. So that will mean Shabbat is at 9:15, Sunday is at 8:45, a weekday morning would be at 6:45. On rare occasions, we add larger experiences to the davening, and we'll move it up even a half an hour on certain occasions. And that's how the time for Shacharit is chosen. Mincha, the afternoon service, we recite in the time of year when there is still daylight in the afternoon, when we meet at 7:30. So Mincha, right, and Mariv we do Sunday through Thursday, usually in the summer and parts of the spring. Mincha on Saturdays is chosen when it's still daylight. Mincha is a service that usually takes place in the middle of the day, kind of your midday check-in, and we'll talk more about it when we get there. So we have on Shabbat afternoons, Mincha, this time of year. Yesterday it was at 4:15 when there was still daylight. And as the days now are getting longer, thankfully, right, we move Mincha accordingly a little bit later and later so we can still have Mincha, and Shabbat, which is the Mariv, the evening service. 7:30 in the evening, I think, was chosen so that people can come home, have dinner, and then come to davening and to an evening event or an evening meeting, etc. All right, I'm going to jump into the next part, which is page 1 of the Siddur, if you want to follow along.
I just want to say that on the outline, those pages that are in parentheses are ones that are not done here. They're done either, or they're not done during the service, they're done either at home or prior to the service. They're not part of the service yet.
Excellent. So page 1 is not done in the minyan, but you can do it at home. This is probably the most important part of my day. And occasionally when I miss it, I always, it's like a trip, just starting right out of the gate. It's like you're going on a race, and if I miss it, I just kind of stumble right out of the gate. Right, starting your day with this simple line on the top of page 1 is one of the most important teachings in our tradition. Modeh for a man or modah for a woman, ani lefanecha, melech el chai v'kayam shechazarta binishmati b'chamla rabba emunatecha. right? I am grateful to you, living, enduring, sovereign, for restoring my soul to me in compassion. You are faithful beyond measure. We're supposed to start each day with a sense of gratitude, right? So right when we wake up, before you check your phone, before you run and do something else and run to the bathroom or realize you're already running late, stop and acknowledge the gift of a new day and be grateful for it. The rabbis imagined that our soul every night ascends a little bit of the way to heaven. The rabbis imagined that sleep is 1/60th of death, and that even going to sleep is like losing a sense of your consciousness and your awareness. But when you are given that again, in a new day of life, that is an incredible gift and is not to be forgotten. It has to be acknowledged and appreciated. And by starting your day with a sense of gratitude, that hopefully then impacts everything you're going to do. You bring a sense of gratitude to everyone. I'm grateful for Kathy and Beth for helping me put together this course. I'm grateful for all of you for being here. I'm grateful for those of you who are going to click and watch it at home for watching this. How great it is that we get to learn and study together. Right? Then your whole day shifts from a place of maybe negativity, maybe constraint, to a place of being open and thankful and grateful. And that connects to this idea of being in relationship with others. When we open ourselves up to gratitude, it changes even the way we interact with anyone. Because we start that interaction instead of a place of, oh, this should have been done and this didn't get done, which sometimes we do. That happens for many of us automatically. We go to a comparative mind, right? And we say, oh, this should be this way, a very analytic way. This could have been better. But instead we say, wow, that was great. And instead we focus on bringing a sense of positive energy. That's the first thing you say. You can still be in bed. You don't need a kippah to say it. It deliberately doesn't have God's name. So you can say it in any state, anywhere. But you start your day with a sense of gratitude. And it is in parentheses because we don't do it as part of the service. Now we're coming into shul. Hopefully you've gotten dressed. Always nice to do that. If you've eaten breakfast, you've eaten breakfast. Some people don't eat breakfast until after they daven to first kind of be fulfilling their obligation to take care of their spiritual needs, their obligations, if you will, to God and to the tradition, and then eat afterwards. But now let's say you're at synagogue and you're in the middle of page 1. And while we don't say it on weekday minions, we do say it on Shabbat mornings at 9:30. If you get there right on time, the first thing we do is say Ma Tovu, which is the same idea. Ma means how or what, and Tov means good. How good it is for all of us to be here in this moment. This is the line that the non-Jewish prophet Bilam said when he was supposed to curse the Jewish people in the wilderness. And Bilam got up there for this big curse. Apparently he was like a very big prophet, he was a big deal. And Bilam, the big deal, got up there. He was paid a lot of money by King Balak to curse the Jewish people, the Israelites who were wandering through the wilderness. And here's this big moment. And instead, out of his mouth comes, how good are you? Ma tovu o alecha. How good are your dwelling places, your tents, O Jacob? Mishkanotecha, your dwelling places, Israel. Your dwelling places, O Israel. And King Balak's like, I got to get my money back. But Bilam, right, was reflecting on seeing the positive in there. And he couldn't help but be overwhelmed by that and share words of goodness. So it becomes a model on a few levels, right, about entering into a space with a sense of positive energy. And so whenever we come to shul, we were reminded of that. Come into this space and into any gathering of people with a sense of positive energy. And we also learned something very profound. Bilam, of course, is not Jewish. And the first words that we say when we come into a Jewish space are written by someone who's not Jewish, to remind us that we learn from all people, right? No matter what tradition. We learn from all different traditions, all different people, all different backgrounds. And so that's how we open. We say that together as a community on Shabbat mornings, and on weekday mornings, you can say it as you walk into the minyan, into the space, or you can say it at home in any place. The next blessing takes us to page 2. It's not said as a minyan, but as the blessing for the talit. Now, I could give a whole long class on the talit, but since I'm already running behind schedule, surprisingly, I can't. But I'll say this about the talit. The talit is one of the most beautiful traditions ever given to the Jewish people. And it was given to the entire Jewish people, men and women. And sadly, over the course of Jewish history, men took it away from women and said, you guys can't wear this. It's just for us. And so some of us, including me, have been trying to restore that injustice that was done in our tradition and try to repair that. The imagery of a talit is supposed to be like the Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of God's presence, right? The nurturing aspect, the aspect of compassion, of rachamim, about which I spoke yesterday, connected to the word rechem, meaning womb, right? The talit is supposed to be in that space that all of us began our lives in. Each and every one of us began our lives in a womb, being nurtured, being protected, being sheltered, right? And so the talit is supposed to be like that kind of a space, like we're being taken care of. Imagine a child with a security blanket, and they're wrapped in it, and they feel totally, right, sheltered, protected, a sense of love and warmth, right? And so the talit is something that I recommend for everyone to use. There are two kinds of talit as the custom evolved. One that you wear under your clothing, the talit katan that I'm wearing under my shirt, right? And then there's the talit that we wear, right, when we daven. Originally, there was only one talit, right? It was tzitzit attached to your clothing, and you put it on their clothing, and every Jew wore it. And it was a democratic idea, right? It used to be in the ancient world, who could tie these special fringes to their clothing? Someone who is a royalty, or someone who is extremely wealthy. Special people got to wear the tzitzit. And the Torah says in the 3rd paragraph of the Shema, where we quote it every day, every Jew wears it. Every Jew is royalty. Every Jew is fundamentally equal. And that's a really important value that we weave into the talit. So I recommend everyone putting on the talit. If you want a more feminine talit, because you're not used to wearing it, because for most of recent Jewish history, women have not worn talitot, then that's what you should wear. And it can be personalized, and it can be something that you make. It can be designed in all different ways. But the idea of having that article of spirituality is very deep and very important, right? When we say the Shema, and it talks about the tzitzit, our tradition says if you're saying the Shema and you don't have the tzitzit, you're in essence undermining the whole prayer, right? Because then you were in essence saying something that you're not doing. So it's very important in my eyes, in my estimation, to have tzitzit, and we should all be engaged in that. In a weekday service, the next mitzvah is the tefillin. Now, tefillin probably were worn all day in ancient times, right? And we have stories about our ancient rabbis who wore tefillin. It was probably much smaller than the tefillin we wear today, but they wore it all day. The tefillin is an absolutely brilliant mitzvah, which again, I could spend many classes on, right? And it ties in with the ancient notion that we are physical beings, and that we're impacted by things that are physical. And just like people wear special necklaces, right, or amulets, right, or special things that kind of give them a feeling of connection and spirituality, our tradition said, we will do that too. They made one subtle switch between this pagan custom and what was existing in the pagan world and with what the rabbis wanted to create. And that difference was that in the tefillin, right, there was in other societies, inside the little box was a little idol. And so that idol, right, was what you were focused on. That was the ultimate truth, was that idol. And our tradition says, okay, we understand you have the need for something physical and concrete, but we're going to just do a little swap. We're just going to swap it out. You won't even notice it. We're going to take the idol out of your regular Folgers crystals, and instead, oh no, we replace it with Folgers crystals. I got it wrong. And we're going to replace it with the words of God, with words of eternity, right, with ultimate values and ultimate morality. And so those little mini scrolls of Torah, which we will unpack on February 4th as part of the worldwide wrap, right, that reminds us, right, of everything that is of value in our tradition, of God and God's ideals, right, and justice and loving kindness and mercy and compassion that we say when we put on the tefillin. And so the little mini Torah scroll goes in the box of the head tefillin and the one on our arm, and we spell out God's mystical name. God's mystical name also appears on the mezuzah, on the doorpost, Shin Daled Yud. Many theories about this name. Shaddai. Many different theories about what exactly this name of God means. It's a name of protection. It's a name of intensity. Some people say it connects to the word Shaddai, that it is enough. God's presence is enough. And the tefillin has the shin on the head tefillin, the daled behind the nape of the neck, also hitting an acupuncture point, no extra charge for that, right? And the yud on the arm, to remind us that God, Shaddai, is everywhere in the universe. God is woven into the fabric of the universe. But then we spell out God's name on our hands, Shin Daled Yud, to remind us that we are God's hands. I always say this to doctors. You are literally God's hands, helping people see, helping people live, right? You are God's hands in this universe. And we all are, in essence, God's hands. Right? The actions that we do each and every day bring God fully into the universe. And that's a very important teaching in the tefillin. You see the blessings for putting on the tefillin on page 3. And if you're more curious, on February 4th, come at 8:30, and we'll have the worldwide wrap and we can learn more. The next blessings, page 4, we don't say in the minyan, but they are among the most beautiful and the most treasured blessings. The blessing for our body. Any of us who've had problems when our body doesn't work, something that should be open was blocked, something that should be closed was open, right? Know that the human body is incredibly intricate and wondrous and magnificent, but also fragile, and it can fall apart. And this bracha acknowledges that. Some Jews recite this bracha after using the restroom throughout the day. Some people say it once in the morning as acknowledgement of both the wonder of the body and also how delicate and how fragile it is. So there's a blessing for the body on page 4 at the top, and then its counterpoint. We as Jews do not believe in the soul being better than the body, as some traditions would have it. And they would say, we don't need pleasures of the body is secondary, right? And there are other traditions that say, it's only about the body, and pleasures of the body, there is no soul. In Judaism, we believe that both soul and body, your sense of awareness, right, your conscience, this deeper level, your soul, and your physical essence are woven together, and they impact on each other. When your body's not working well, it impacts on your soul. It certainly did for me. And when your soul is nourished, it can actually bring health to your body. And we know this from studying things like meditation and mindfulness practice, how that can actually impact on your physical body. And the two are woven together, and the blessings complement each other on page 4 with the first 2 paragraphs. Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist living in northern Israel in Tzfat in the 1500s, then said, you should say this next line, Hareini mikabel for a man, or mikabelet for a woman, alai mitzvata borei. Right, I hereby accept the obligation of fulfilling my Creator's mitzvah of the Torah, love your neighbor as yourself. Reminding us that the point of prayer is, of course, to move from the self, as I said earlier, to others. And so he made sure that that would be concretized explicitly. And we'll see it in the different tefillot. But here he made it very concrete. Say this line every morning to make sure you're focused on that. And here he has it. And then we have the study of Torah. We're supposed to be always engaged in studying Torah as we are right now. And so there are blessings for the study of Torah each and every morning. One of the notions that's so beautiful in this blessing, it says, V'ha'arevna. Make the words pleasant, right? Make them delicious. Make them a delight. The more we study the tradition, I find, the more I encounter the incredible wisdom of this tradition that our spiritual ancestors had. And it is delicious. It is just amazing. And so we want to approach it from that same place as we take it in and as it's passed on into the future, into future generations. And then we have passages of study, a classic text from the Torah, from the Mishnah, and from the Gemara, the 2 parts that make up the Talmud on page 5, so you can actually study all of those. All right, I'm going to take a quick pause for any questions up until this part. All of these are the preliminaries in our morning minyan, which means we haven't even started the morning minyan, but we're about to.
Are women laying tefillin?
That is a great question. So traditionally, women were forbidden from laying tefillin, from donning the tefillin. Again, in a kind of misogynistic move, if you ask me. And if you read the text, it says women cannot put on tefillin because they are not as conscientious about their hygiene as men. And I read those texts from the Middle Ages, and I say, oh, this is from the Middle Ages. And that's why it was the Middle Ages. So we know, for example, that there were many women who wore tefillin in the tradition. But the fact that they were more singled out says that this was not the common practice, as opposed to the talit, which may have in fact been all of Israel in ancient times. We know that Michal, David's wife, wore tefillin, and we know that all of Rashi's daughters, Rashi had only daughters, they all wore tefillin. So we know of those examples. They were probably more of the exception, but we know that it was allowed. Women asked to wear tefillin after that time, and they were denied that because of that offensive reason I just gave you. So one of the first women to ever bring this back as a custom, and she started 38 years ago, was my mother, and a Lapidus learner. And so she has worn her tefillin every single day since then. So it's been a custom that has been restored to women only in the last few decades. But the reason that it's cited is both offensive and incorrect. And so for me, it's an issue of justice. So we teach everyone in our shul, all of the 7th graders, boys and girls, and their parents, men and women, to put on tefillin. And I encourage women to put on tefillin. Some of the women who put on tefillin are sitting in this room right now. Some of them come to Minyan every day and model, to me, a very powerful practice and part of our tradition. Other questions? Narayla.
Sorry if I missed it, but who is the he that you're referring to when you said it's important that he says we're moving from the self to the others?
Oh, that was Isaac Luria, this Kabbalist living in northern Israel, who added this line into his prayer book to say it's not enough to kind of feel that we're moving from the self to the other. He wanted to make it explicit. And so he added that line as a kavanah, as an intentionality, kind of a meditative statement to say each and every day to make sure you got it. Don't miss this.
When was that?
That was in the 1500s. So anything that's from the 1500s in our tradition, it would be relatively new, and that would be kind of a newer innovation. That's around the same time that the Kabbalists that he was connected to in northern Israel, in Tzfat, right, created the Kabbalat Shabbat service, the service for welcoming Shabbat. Those are what we call new, modern innovations. The ritual of staying up all night on Shavuot to kind of accept the Torah anew, like you're standing at Sinai, called the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, also created by the Kabbalists. Having a Tu B'Shvat Seder, as we're going to have next week on Sunday at the end of the Glotzer Memorial Weekend, on Sunday at lunch. You're all welcome to come and join us. That's also a modern Kabbalistic innovation. These all date from about 500 years ago. Okay, let's jump back into the Siddur. We're on page 6. If you're at the morning minyan on Sunday at 9 o'clock, on a weekday morning at 7 o'clock, we're right on time, and here we go. And the leader is starting on page 6. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech v'bina lavchin ben yom u'ben laila. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who gave the rooster the ability to distinguish between day and night. And you're looking around the room and you're like, there's sometimes turkeys outside, and there are, but there's no rooster. So of course, to understand this bracha, you have to understand when it was written. The blessing is found in the Talmud. It's written about 2,000 years ago, and it was written because the first thing that you heard, right, from your bed was in fact the rooster. That was your alarm clock. Right, nowadays I get a gentle vibration of this Fitbit on my wrist. And if I'm lucky enough to really think about it and be aware enough, I will say this blessing. Because even though I'm not using my hearing sense, I'm using a sense to wake up. And that's really where that blessing exists. These morning blessings were originally written for the act of waking up, of hearing the rooster crow, of putting on your shirt, of stretching, of standing up, of putting on your belt, of putting on your shoes and starting on your way. Over time, it became difficult for people to sort of remember to do all these blessings as they started their day, and so they got put into the morning service. In some communities, by the way, they're not recited here. If you go to some Sephardic communities, right, Jews originally from the areas around the Mediterranean and Arab lands, right? If you go to those communities, they will often not begin here because they assume that you've recited these at home as part of kind of a wake-up ritual. What's neat about these brachot is they're not only connected to waking up, but they're connected to others, right? Praise to you, Adonai, our God, right? Who frees the bound. So we're supposed to think about, right, how do we take care of others who need to be freed in the world, right? So Kev Kufim lifts those who are bent over. How do we take care of someone, whether literally or metaphorically, who is bent over and needs that kind of help? So they also take us on a journey about connecting to others, a chesed journey, a journey of loving kindness. And these brachot brilliantly bring that into existence. We usually say them all out loud, and whether you're thinking about the actions of waking up and getting dressed and starting your day, or whether you're thinking about helping others, or both, those are some of the thoughts certainly that come to my mind as I recite these brachot. All of this culminates in this additional bracha on page 6, which is incredibly beautiful, focusing on, right, humility, reminding us that we need extra support from God, from others in doing good deeds, and that this is how we need to be focused. The Khatimah, the signature of this blessing, the last line, is incredibly important. Praise to you, Adonai, Gomel Chasadim Tovim Le'amo Yisrael, who bestows loving kindness, great loving kindness, good loving kindness upon God's people Israel. Right? We've been given kindness, and then we're supposed to bring that out into the world. And this is one of those brachot, right, that is really helping us move from the self to others. Page 7 and 8 is an additional blessing, also incredibly beautiful. One that I could spend many, many minutes on, but I don't have the time. But a blessing that moves, right, from a very intense internal place, right, into others. And the way this blessing works is by negating the self, what I would call radical self-negation. What are we? What is the point to our lives? This was originally written by a rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, for Yom Kippur, right? When you're really intensely focused on negating the self, then it says, wait, but we do have worth. We have this great tradition. We're descended from people who had incredible insights into how to live our lives. And we have this model of Jacob, who was kind of crooked. In fact, his name means heel. Who was kind of behaving in not the most perfect way, and was able to straighten himself out and change his behavior. That becomes a model for us each and every day. And the point of this prayer, and it ends very powerfully on page 8, Mekadesh et Shimcha barabim. Right? You sanctify your people, God, birabim, in community, by being in relationship to others. So I'm going to keep kind of pointing out that theme as we work our way through the davening. Mekadesh et Shimcha barabim. Some communities do a study text here and a Kaddish to Rabbanan. Our community moves ahead to page 14, which is Psalm 30. Again, an incredible psalm, and one of the psalms we should do in next year's course, which is, I think it's going to be about psalms. We'll do maybe 3 or 4 psalms, one each week, because they're incredible texts. And Psalm 30 takes us on a very intense journey about healing, about renewal. I'll point out one line in the middle. Be'erev yalim bechi v'laboker rina. In the evening, sometimes tears come, and sometimes a sense of sadness, sometimes even a sense of despair. But when a new day dawns, and the sun rises, and we're filled with a sense of gratitude at renewal, right, there's a sense of joy at that moment. And that is a fundamentally important approach. It gets picked up by the Hasidic tradition, right? Mitzvah gedolah liyot besimcha tamid. It's a great mitzvah to try to restore yourself to a place of happiness as often as you can. And then, since we've said the Kaddish, right, since we've said Psalm 30, a biblical text, we can now say a Kaddish. Now, why is there a mourner's Kaddish here in the beginning, or toward the beginning of the service, right? Or normally we expect it to be at the end of the service where it also is found. And the reason is because people come late and they have to leave early. So we add Kaddishes around so that there's more of a chance that you'll have one. So as the tefillah evolved, as the service evolved, there were more additional Kaddishes brought in, because if someone has to leave early and they're a mourner and they wouldn't get the mourner's Kaddish, we made sure there was one at the beginning of the service. So if you look, pretty much every service has a mourner's Kaddish. Right? If it's a very short service, then there'll just be one at the end. But the longer services have one at the beginning and one at the end. That ends the opening section of the service, which is called Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings. So all of this is kind of warm-up, as we talked about, some done at home, some done in the synagogue, but all of it about moving from yourself right into that next circle of moving beyond ourselves and being more in connection with community. And that brings us to the second section of the service. And I'll quickly pause here for some questions. Yeah.
A quick question on the last point you made with the mourner's cottage. I was under the impression that you try to get it in 3 times. Is there anything about saying it 3 times in a service?
So in the morning service, the way it evolved, because we say the Psalm of the day and we have 2, you do get 3 if you come to the whole service. The original notion of Kaddish is to say it right for a loved one at every service, which would be once a day. So you would have it at Shachri in the morning service, you would have it at Mincha in the afternoon service, you would have it at Marav in the evening service. I think what's referring is, okay, so I might not make all the services. I got 3 in the morning, I covered my day, and it's hard sometimes to make all the minions, so I think that's how those 2 got combined in that way. Yeah, Donna.
This is just a matter of phraseology, and you once led a meditation on page 6 where you said, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And to me that is much more intimate than saying Baruch atah Adonai. It's like putting Adonai out there. And I just like it phrased 2 words at a time.
Nice. So what Donna's pointing out is the basic bracha formula, which is in all blessings, actually takes us on a journey also, right? And the 2 couplets are important to point out. Baruch atah, Baruch is a very hard word to translate. Just we have to stop and acknowledge how hard it is. Baruch, we sometimes see it as praised or blessed. Baruch is the way we welcome someone. Right? How do you say in Hebrew, you're welcome? Bruchim habayim, you're welcome. Right? It's about acknowledging someone's presence. So Baruch atah is you are welcome into this moment and acknowledging God's presence. And it's intimate. It's starting with the self. Adonai Eloheinu, the next couplet, is Adonai our God, is welcoming God into a community, into a minyan, into this room, into this space, into all the people who I'm looking at. And then the third couplet, right, Melech haolam, ruler of the universe, is going beyond the room. Now we're connecting to all humanity. So right in the bracha formula, you go on a nice journey from the self, from a kind of intimate connection of acknowledging God's presence, right? And you're kind of working through those next 2 circles in community, and then, if you will, through the universe and all humanity and even the entire universe. So thank you for making sure we remember that. We'll see that in a number of places as well. Okay, if we're going strong, let's keep going strong. On to page 16. We're ready for the second part of the service. We've done our warm-ups, whether we've done them at home or whether we've recited them in the service. And now we're ready for the second part, which is Pesukei de Zimra. Pesukei from the word pasuk, meaning pasuk, a verse, right? In the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, we have prakim, chapters, and then we have psukim, which are verses. Verses de Zimra, right? Verses, this is Aramaic, right? Shins and Dalet switches in Aramaic, so in Hebrew this would be she or of, zemer. What is zemer? Song. Verses of song, right? Passages of happiness and joy, right? This is our singing time. And Pesukei de Zimra is an additional part of the service that was added. Don't forget, the core of every morning service is the Shema, is the understanding of the oneness of God and the universe, the blessings that surround the Shema, because you can't just jump into that oneness, right? And then the Amidah. Those are the 2 basic pillars, and hopefully we will get there in a few minutes. But in order to warm up, even for the warm-up, we added a warm-up. And this is the warm-up number 3. And that is just singing. And for all of us who love singing, or even if we don't love singing as much, there's something incredibly transformative about just singing. Yesterday during Kiddush, Benny led a nigun saloon, which is just singing nigunim, singing melodies, and you're just swept away by singing. And that is in fact what Pesukei de Zimra is supposed to be about. Using song to kind of open up our hearts to a sense of gratitude and an abundance of praise and happiness and joy. Think about the feeling on a great Kabbalat Shabbat with the singing and the ruach and the spirit and the feeling. It just kind of carries you away like you're on a wave of happiness. And that's in fact what this morning section is about. What's our greatest text about happiness and joy and praise and song in the tradition from the Tanakh? So perhaps the Ashrei, Psalm 145. In fact, the book of Psalms as a whole is the kind of tradition's favorite book of songs. That was our ancient songbook. Like we didn't have these little benchers on the tables that had the Amuna logo and had a few songs. We had the book of Psalms. And so if you really wanted to get into a song session, you sang the whole book. And there were people who would read or sing the entire book of Psalms. That was deemed a little bit lengthy, so we went with the last 6 Psalms, Psalms 145 to 150. And in the Jewish tradition, when you complete a book, it's as if you get credit for the whole book. And that's our way of singing. And that way you get the Ashrei, because Ashrei is Psalm 145, and that's really the bulk of Pesukei de Zimra, of these verses of song. It kicks off with a rabbinic blessing, Baruch She'amar V'haya Olam. And this is a very important blessing. Right? This blessing that starts this section of praise has a couple of rituals. One ritual is to grab a tzitzit from each side of the talit, bring them together. Right? To remind ourselves that God is not mentioned in this little poem on the top of page 6. You don't see God's name. Of course, God pervades it. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into existence. Blessed be that one. Blessed is the one who does the work of creation. Blessed is the one who speaks and does. But it never says God's name. And so our tradition offers us a really neat teaching. It is to take the 2 tzitzit, right? To bring those tzitzit into our hands, right? And the tzitzit, right, represent, if you will, God's presence. And the way they do this is by having 8 strings and 5 knots in each tzitzit. And now it's a math class. 8 plus 5? Okay, and I gathered 2 of them up. And we write out God's name on the board. Yud is equal to what number? 10. Hey is equal to? 5. Vav is equal to? 6. And then another hey is 5. 10, 5, 6, 5 is in fact?
26.
Anyway, try to make every moment a moment of joy, right? 10, 5, 6, 5 is 26. The 2 tzitzit equal God's name. And the teaching is, God is present throughout the universe, but again, like the tefillin, and this one's nice because we don't put on tefillin on Shabbat and holidays, but we always put on the talit. And so we gather the tzitzit to remind us that we are bringing God fully into the universe. And by singing songs of praise, we're also engaging in that. Okay? So we grab the tzitzit, we acknowledge the wonder and the wondrousness of this universe. And then we go on a journey.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If it's significant that God's name is not mentioned in the Hebrew, then why in the English do they put it in over time? Is it not then kind of...
So Joel opens up a masterful and huge topic, the problem of translation. Which is why after this class you should all go sign up for Ivrit Lakol and learn Hebrew. Because there's no replacement to that. The English is impossible to translate this prayer. It is literally, blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into existence. That would be a literal translation. But they decided to make it more clear who that one that spoke was, and so they inserted God's name, and they lost that. It would be interesting if someone wants to grab a Lev Shalem and tell me how they translated it in our new Siddur. Maybe they solved that problem using brackets or with a commentary. But you really need different columns. You need a literal translation so you know what the Hebrew means, and then you need another column to sort of bring out what does it actually mean. And sometimes those are a little bit different. The English translations never capture the kind of magnificence and the multi-layered richness of the words of the Hebrew. The Hebrew is a much older language, right? So the fact that it's so much older means that you have so many more layers of meaning. And it's also one of the only languages that's been reborn and resurrected in human history. Maybe is the only one in the modern state of Israel and modern Hebrew, right? So you have both ancient, biblical, rabbinic Hebrew, and of course modern Hebrew. Beth, what do we have?
Blessed is the one whose word called the world into being. It's all blessing is the one.
So that is in fact how it should be, and that's why we have a new Siddur. And once they have a weekday edition, we'll be very excited, because then you will have more of the kind of the actual poetry and texture of the Hebrew there. This prayer is said while standing, and this kind of calls to attention the beginning of the service. We usually skip over these next pieces of praise and jump to page 20. Mizmor LeTodah, there's a lot to say here. It's a psalm of thanksgiving. It's a very short psalm. If you want to memorize a psalm, this is your one to memorize, because it's only got 4 lines. It's easy to memorize. In the Jewish tradition, if you're cutting through some space, like if I have to walk through here and I'm not stopping, you're supposed to at least say some word of praise. So I always say Psalm 100 as I have to cut through the synagogue, or if I'm just walking in to move things around or to deal with something. I say Mizmor LeTodah, a psalm of thanksgiving. It's just about being filled with a sense of joy, and we usually stand for it, connected to what took place in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple thousands of years ago. Then we jump to the Ashrei. The Ashrei, again, will be one of our psalms for next year's class. It's such a great psalm. I can't do a lot on it today except to say that the Ashrei, as an alphabetic acrostic, using words in each line and then repeating them in the next line and expanding upon them, is basically cascading praise. I usually describe it to my 7th graders and their parents in the image that I once had going to my cousin's wedding, who married a woman whose family hailed from Yemen, in Ashkelon, in southern Israel. And we went to the wedding where her father was very well known in the community, and they had invited 600 people. And when we walked into the wedding hall, there was a huge display of wine glasses stacked in a pyramid with rows and rows on top of each other. 600 wine glasses, and there was wine, or maybe it was just water that looked like wine, flowing over them. Like Psalm 23, Kosi Revaya, my cup overflows with joy. And it's just cascading joy. Just imagine such an abundance of happiness, it can't be contained. And it spills out into the next layer and the next level, on and on and on. And the Ashrei takes us on that journey. It also goes in the same formula of the bracha, starting with the self, moving to community, going to all of humanity. And next year's class, we'll get to see that more intensely. It also connects to the tefillin. We open up our hands in the pay line, poteach et yadecha, right? God, you open up your metaphoric hands and sustain all living things. So too, we should open up our hands and think about how we today will sustain all humanity and beyond. Some people have the custom during the weekday service of touching the tefillin of the arm, poteach et yadecha, you open your hands. How am I physically, concretely going to do acts of kindness in this world? Touching it to our lips, right? May those teachings become the teachings I speak, and touch the tefillin of the head, right? And even my thoughts will be impacted by ideas of Torah. It looks a little bit like crossing yourself. It's unclear who came up with that custom first. I have no problem with doing customs that look similar to other things, including prostration, which we came up with, it's clear, and the Muslims ran with it, hate, and so we do it on the high holidays, and everyone lives happily ever after, God willing. All right, the Psalms keep going all the way to 150. Some people like to sing 150. The last one on page 25, it is filled with a sense of song and jubilance and exuberance, and the last line really sums it all up. Kol hanshamat hallelujah, hallelujah. Let every breath of life, right, all praise God. Just imagine a chorus of all creatures of this entire planet just engaged in a dance of joy and be filled with a sense of gratitude and wonder. And by exercising this gratitude part of yourself over and over again, and it is like exercise, you're building muscle memory. And by starting your morning filled with this sense of gratitude, and you've done it over and over again, by the time you step out of davening, hopefully, you now have exercised that gratitude muscle to the point that it'll just keep working like all throughout the day. and you'll just be filled with a sense of gratitude, wonder, happiness, and joy. Where are we on the chart?
Rabbi, I would just like to say that
Yeah.
on Tuesdays, people can hear that one.
That's the day that you're leading us in song. Every davener has their own little style, and every day can be a little different. So on Tuesdays and Sundays and Saturdays, Psalm 150 gets its full presentation. All right, we are up to page 29. I am about 10 minutes behind where I wanted to be, so I'm trying to catch up a little bit. Every mitzvah in our tradition that's important pretty much opens with a blessing. If it's an important mitzvah, before we do it, right, we're lighting the candles, we're going to say a blessing. Right, we're going to eat a meal, a mitzvah meal, we're going to say the motzi. Really important mitzvahs actually get a blessing before them, then comes the mitzvah, and then a blessing afterwards. Think about the meal, right? Has hamotzi, washing the hands before. If it's a holiday meal, kiddush. Then it has the meal itself, and then gets birkat hamazon. So it is with Psukei de Zimra. This singing is very important singing, and a very important part of our day. It gets the blessing Baruch Shamar at the beginning, and on page 29, it gets Yishtabach, a closing prayer of praise at the end, to make sure we've really locked in this sense of blessing. Then we come to the Kaddish. All right, the Kaddish is a very long class in itself. Maybe 2 years from now, we'll do a whole class on the Kaddish. The Kaddish evolved as being a closing of learning. If you like this class, at the end you would say, that was great, let's praise God. And everyone would respond to your invitation by saying, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Omeomaya. Right, may God's great name be praised forever and ever. And then we would all go and say, oh, that was great, okay. We closed it out. And the Kaddish then evolved from being a praise after study to being a praise after sections of the service, which also sometimes involves study. But here it tells you where you're moving in the tefillah. So if you have a Kaddish, you know you're moving from one section to another. When we had the Birchot HaShachar, the morning blessings, the warm-ups, we had a mourner's Kaddish functioning as remind you that you're transitioning from one section to another. Here we have a half Kaddish, the Chatzi Kaddish, right, the shortest Kaddish, to mark the transition from Psukei de Zimra, the Psalms of praise, this abundance of gratitude, of happiness, of wonder, of joy, into Shachari. And so whenever you hear a Kaddish, you sort of know, oh, we're making a transition. Now, there's a lot to say more about the Kaddish, and we'll come back to it probably next week. Now we're up to the actual call to worship. Okay? Quick question, Hal.
When most of us don't come in at the beginning. When most of us come in, we always look around and say, what page are we on? And we all turn to that page. Should we be doing that? Or should we then say, you know, I haven't been here. I should really start with the blessings for the body, blessings for the soul, and catch up to everybody at some point.
It's on last week's video. The answer to that is on last week's video.
Yeah. Great question. And I just, the answer is complicated. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I did talk about it last week. I'll try to come back to it next week. But the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it's more important to be together with everyone, and you want to jump into that moment. Sometimes, depending where that moment is and what the different things you've missed are, you go back and you just do your own pace. So it's a complicated answer, and that'll be like davening 201.
Marty has a question.
Marty.
I don't want to open a can of worms.
But here we go.
If page 25 through 29 aren't done, we could have saved a lot of paper. So what's the rationale for not doing these pages which are, somebody has made a decision that they're significant, but we don't do them? So can you give a quick answer to that?
So pages 25 to 29 we do in the service. I didn't do them in this class explicitly, but we do them in the service. That's how we conclude the book of Psalms. That's how we sort of go out and read the whole book of Psalms by doing Psalms 145 to 150.
No, it's between Psalm 150 and...
Oh, why we don't do, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the whole Red Sea thing and all that.
So that's a longer discussion about why that wasn't part of the service. Certainly when I came here, it wasn't. And so What?
Short answer.
I
I'll
think
give you the-
because for some people it's very, very negative and harsh, right? Focusing on the Shir HaTayam, while a great song of praise, and probably our most ancient text in the entire Hebrew language and in our entire tradition in terms of when it was written, because it talks about the Egyptians being hurled into the sea, and because it focuses a little bit on the death of our enemies, I think, for me personally, it's not sometimes where I want to be in the morning. It's not my sense of happiness and praise.
And there are similar answers for other omissions throughout the book?
Yeah, all of that is the introduction, to that whole section. That's the core of that section. We usually do it on the times of the year when it's connected directly to the service or to the Torah reading. But we can go into that a little bit more another time. All right, what am I going to do? Page 30, the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. Maybe you've been to Israel and you've heard a mosque start its call. That was our idea, and it was a good one, right? So imagine we all lived in a community within a few hundred feet in a kind of a village, and someone would call out the Baruch Hu. This is the beginning of the davening, and in Sephardic communities, this is often sometimes where they pick up the davening, is at the Baruch Hu. And that gets to be a call, and wherever you are and you hear Baruch Hu, you respond with Baruch Adonai Varach Le'olam Vayed. Right? Praise be Adonai, the one who is exalted, the one who is blessed forever. And that's really our call to worship. And so when you are hearing that, the prayer leader both bows, Baruch Hu, et God's name, Adonai and Barach, you're standing up straight for God's name, and wherever you are, you respond like that. So if you can't orient yourself east, you can. Baruch, bow at the knees and the waist, God's name, Adonai, you're standing up straight, Adonai and Barach Le'olam Vayed. There is some communities where you don't fully stand, you just kind of bow forward in your chair. So if it's hard to get up and down, which it is for some of us, then stay seated, and you can bow simply by moving your body forward that way. That is the way of acknowledging. Don't forget the word Baruch is connected to the word Berech, meaning knee. So by bowing, you're bringing a sense of humility into yourself. And again, if you're making yourself a little bit more humble, there's more space for others in your experience and in the world. This opening blessing, which then starts in the middle of page 30 to the bottom of 31, is all about light and creation. Originally written for the moment of sunrise, right? It praises God, right, for this incredible universe. And if you can, try to look outside when you say this blessing, right? Try to look at something in nature. Or if you're in a room where there's no windows, or I don't know, it's a cloudy day, close your eyes and imagine an amazing sunrise that you once saw, or someplace in nature. This is a universal blessing that connects us to all humanity, and focusing on the notion of creation, nature, the universe, and light and dawn. It then inserts in page 31 a little bit of Kadosh, 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 a little bit of the kind of traditional praise that we have in the Kedusha that we'll see in the Amidah. And then it ends very beautifully on the bottom of page 31, right? God, you are unique, doing mighty deeds, creating new life, reaping victory, building, bringing healing, right? This notion of sort of acknowledging God in all of God's wondrousness. But it's really focused on nature, and it ends again with the theme of life, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. May a new light dawn on Zion. And again, this is kind of moving away from the universalistic theme. This was actually a big debate in the tradition. Should this part be focused on Zion if it's a universal blessing? Rav Sadia Gaon, the great Babylonian rabbi who lived about 1,200 years ago, said no. The people said yes, and the rabbis usually lose, as is still the case. And the people voted with their feet, and they inserted something more particularistic into a universal blessing. Everything then moves from this theme of creation and universality to a much more particular lens on page 32 with Ahava Rabbah. Right, this is now the lens of revelation. Right, that we were standing at Sinai receiving this amazing gift, the core of our Torah, and so we go back to that. And that is a gift of Ahava, a gift of love. We were given this amazing toolbox right behind these doors about how to live our lives, what are the values we want to bring into our lives and into the world, and we appreciate them as a gift of love. And so this whole blessing is focused on the Torah, the mitzvot, as a basic way to live our lives, and what a gift they are, right? And then we feel that sense of love, and we bring that right into the Shema. And so you see this beautiful flow from, right, revelation. We had creation, the first blessing, revelation, the second blessing, which is love, which is that we are given this unbelievable way to live our lives. We accept it, we bring in this sense of love, we accept the love, and then we reciprocate it. I was just talking with our 7th graders just a few minutes ago about how this becomes a life's work. Learning how to accept and reciprocate love is what we are all engaged in. Whether we're children, whether we're adults, whether we're married to someone, all of our relationships are about bringing love into the world, accepting it, and bringing it back to others. Not always easy. Relationships are very complicated. But that is, in fact, what the Shema and this transition reminds us of. If there's no minyan, on page 33, you add 3 words. You want to try to get to 248 words. That's the number of positive commandments in the tradition out of the 613. There's 365 negatives, things you're not supposed to do, 248 positives. And the Shema is 245 words. And they're like, oh, we're so close. Such a cool number. We added in 3 words. You usually do them at the end of the Shema on 34, Adonai Elohechem Emet, when the prayer leader repeats those 2 words and adds those 3 words to get to the 248. If there's no minyan, you don't do that. And instead you add the 3 words El Melech Ne'aman, which also spell out Amen, we agree, because if you're not hearing the blessings, you're not saying Amen to them, and therefore you're missing that, so you kind of incorporate that when you don't have a minyan. When you say the Shema, you want to be as intensely focused on the oneness of God in the universe. And there's all different ways of doing it. First, you've already gathered up your tzitziot, either all 4 or at least the front 2, to kind of feel that oneness of your talit and yourself being at one in that moment. Maybe you're closing your eyes, maybe you're covering your eyes. You're feeling that oneness as intensely as possible. I like to hold on to each word for a little bit longer to really feel that sense of oneness. Then we go into Baruch Shem. That was the line that is the rabbinic response to the biblical words. When the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day of the year, went into the holiest space called the Holy of Holies, right? And went into that space and recited God's ineffable name, Yud He Vav He, which we no longer pronounce. But when he did that, all the people prostrated fully on the ground. Sorry, you can't see it at all. And, right, well, they did the super, you can go to our prostration video and watch that. And they did the full prostration on the ground, and they said, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Praised is God's glorious sovereignty throughout all time, God's glorious name and sovereignty throughout all time. And that's the response. So we sort of accept that oneness with the rabbinic response, if you will, that's human beings accepting what is in the universe and taking that in. And then we say Ve'ahavta, right? We shall love Adonai our God and these values and these teachings and these ideals with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all our might, and teach them to our children. Speak about them when we start out on our day and when we return home, when we wake up and we go to sleep. Tie them on our tefillin, on our arms, and between our eyes, and write them on the mezuzot of our doorposts and gates. A very important part of our tradition. The second paragraph reminds us of the danger of not doing the mitzvot. If we don't engage in mitzvot, things will fall apart. And sure enough, that is true. If we don't take care, there are many mitzvot that talk about protecting our planet and the environment, and when we don't do that, we see that the planet falls apart. Not surprisingly, that's all embedded in the second paragraph of the Shema. The third paragraph of the Shema, right, moving from God, from the mitzvot, takes us to a concrete mitzvah, the tzitzit. And so the custom is to touch the tzitzit to our lips every time they're mentioned. Right, the tzitzit are like little strings that we tie on our fingers to remind us of the mitzvot, that we're supposed to be engaged in them. And so by sort of focusing in on that, we're reminded how we have to do all these mitzvot, positive things today. They're great. What a gift that we have them. We touch them to our lips. They are chavivim. They are a delight for us to engage in. And that's the third paragraph of the Shema. All of that then comes out into the third paradigm. We had creation, we had revelation, and the third theme is redemption. These 3 themes were written by Franz Rosenzweig, the great German Jewish philosopher, and popularized by our own member, Professor Nachum Glotzer, in many of his works. and they pointed out how those three themes, or sometimes one of them, sometimes two of them, sometimes all three, are embedded in almost every Jewish ritual and Jewish prayer. And to really understand those rituals and prayers better, you sort of want to see which theme you're relating to. And redemption, creation, revelation, and redemption, right? The universal blessing, I believe it's in the chart,
Yes.
and it's in your outline. So just keep following along and you'll see it. One thing I forgot to cover, I just see here in my chart, is that the Reform practice is to say out loud, Baruch Shem. Traditionally that was only done on Yom Kippur. And to make that distinction, right, by never saying it out loud, except on Yom Kippur, was really to highlight the intensity of Yom Kippur. And so that's a little different. In the Reform practice, they do that out loud all the time. Where are we? We're up to redemption, page 34.
About covering your eyes during Shema.
I said a little bit about it, right? It's about the intensity. It's about making sure that you're not distracted by anyone else, that you're not sort of too focused on anything except this notion of God's presence, the oneness of God in the universe. And so it could be closing your eyes, it could be covering your eyes. Whatever helps you really get into that moment is really at your discretion. We're up to page 34, redemption. And for us, redemption is all around us. We're always going back to Egypt. We just read it in yesterday's Torah reading, the actual moment of the Exodus, but we're always going back there. Think about in Kiddush on Friday night. Zecher Letziat Mitzrayim, in the memory of the Exodus from Egypt. We're always going back to that moment. And that for us is the moment of being saved, of being redeemed, of healing the world, about being moved to a more just state, which for our ancestors was clearly to no longer be slaves. And so therefore that becomes the model. And we go back to Egypt and to that moment and that narrative all the time, because that's the paradigmatic moment of being redeemed, of being saved. So we go back to it, and then it's a reminder to us, how can we be engaged in that same actions, right? So pages 34 and 35 go back to Egypt, retelling the story of the Exodus, so that we can be filled with a sense of purpose, that we are also engaged in acts of redemption. Page 35, usually the leader picks up at the box, and we sing the words that are bolded together. These are the same words that we said at the Song of the Sea, that Marty asked about a little bit earlier. So we still get to them, luckily, even if we don't sing that whole entire song. They're excerpted here. And then the Chatimah, the signature, praise are you God who redeems Israel, who redeemed Israel in the past. What's neat about this is in the Amidah, this same formulation appears, redeemed Israel, but it's in the present. And so what's neat about it is, here we had an example of it in the past, and the Amidah is about taking all these values and bringing them into this moment, fully embodying them, stepping into them. How will I make this my day today? And I want to transition into the Amidah, and we're going to do a 7-minute Amidah. Here we go. Page 36b. This is the core of every service. Right, even Mincha, which does not have the Shema, has the Amidah. And if it doesn't have an Amidah, it's not a service. And you can see an amazing chart that Hal made up on page, what page is that, Beth?
It doesn't have a number.
It doesn't have a number. It's the back page of your handout, which has all of the structure of the Amidah. So we're going to be on that page. And the Amidah is the central prayer. Every service. On Yom Kippur, when we have 5 prayer services in our most intense day, right, each one of them has an Amidah. And if it doesn't have an Amidah, then it's not really a service. It's called by other names. Amidah is from the word la'amod, a standing prayer. And for those of you who practice yoga, this is mountain pose. You want to be standing up straight with your shoulders back and relaxed. So you can be fully present in the Amidah. It's also known as the Shemona Esrei, the 18 benedictions. And of course, there are 19 because we added one. That's just a classic Jewish tradition. There is some choreography. Why is it said out loud and why is it said silently? Originally, people didn't have prayer books. 19 blessings or even 18 is a lot. So there would be a silent Amidah, so everyone could say it if you knew it, or say at least your closest approximation of what you knew of it, and then there would be a version out loud, and by saying Amen to each blessing, you got credit for it. Today we have a prayer book, so we often do a hybrid version, which is we start out loud. It's also called the Hecha Kedusha, and you recite it together through the first 3 blessings, and then continue silently thereafter. That's what we do in most of our daily minions. Sometimes in the evening, it's not recited out loud at all, right? The evening service evolved later than the other services, and we'll talk more about that in 2 weeks. And so the Amidah is only said silently. So whichever way it's being recited, it's important, to really get at what it means. And by the way, while we do it sometimes in this hybrid formulation, a little bit out loud and a little bit silently, we still sometimes do the repetition. And it's really important to hear that. So we both learn the Hebrew, we still keep that practice, and sometimes we have an opportunity for some more singing. If you like to sing, I like to sing Sim Shalom and Yismachu and Musaf, so those are nice to have that opportunity on Shabbat morning to do a repetition. The choreography is like this. You are entering, imagine, the palace of a great king, a great ruler. This is a most intense moment. You don't just kind of run in. You stop. It has a degree of thoughtfulness. And so we begin with our feet together in this standing up straight pose, and then we take a few steps back, 3 in particular. We start with our right leg back, Adonai, Sfatai, Tiftach, 3 steps, Ufi Agiti Latecha. Adonai, my lips please open, help me speak the right words, help me approach you. Ufi Agiti Latecha, and my mouth will then declare your praise. Right, and those 3 steps back are about humility, about anava, and about making sure we're fully ready, and only when we're ready do we take the 3 steps forward. Sometimes I'm not ready. And I'll take my 3 steps back for a silent Amidah, and I realize I need to actually stay there for a few more moments till I'm really ready to engage in this practice. I might be distracted by other thoughts. I might not be fully in this moment. And if you're not, then there's no point in saying the Amidah. So you have to restart, reboot, turn off your phone, brain, and turn it back on. Whatever you use to reboot yourself. And those 3 steps help us do that. The Amidah starts with bowing. So once we've taken our 3 steps back and forward, Baruch, you bow at the knees. Berech, remember that word. Atah, God's name. Adonai, you're standing up straight. And you do that bowing both at the beginning and the end of the first blessing, and then at the penultimate, second to last blessing, the 18th of the 19th blessings, or the 6th of the 7 on Shabbat. You bow at the word Modim, just at the waist, not with your knees. At the end of that blessing, again, Baruch, Atah, God's name. That's a little of the choreography. Sometimes you'll see people swaying or shuckling, which you're invited to do so, whatever adds to your experience. Sometimes people will put the talit over their heads, right? Whatever helps you feel the intensity of that experience, you're welcome to do. Traditionally, you do not move your legs, however. So you'll see, whether you're swaying or shuckling, you don't move your feet. And your feet are hopefully somewhat together, standing like the angels. We don't know much about the angels, although for me, they're an elaborate metaphor. But what we do know about this elaborate metaphor is that they only have one leg. So we're standing like the angels, who only have one leg, and standing in this kind of position of full attention. Embody this sense of attentiveness and being fully present is a key to it. So let's take a look at some of the blessings in the Amidah, and I'll try to point out a few things. You can follow along on the chart. The beginning begins with words of praise, going back to our ancestors or our spiritual ancestors, the Avot, and thinking about their relationship with bringing this notion of God and the oneness of God into the universe. Then it talks about the powers of God, right? God is supposed to be the healer of the sick, and that reminds us again of how we can be engaged in that. And then the third blessing about holiness. And the Kedusha is this amazing prayer of holiness. Think about your peak moments in your life. When is a moment where you felt like you were experiencing the world on a totally different plane? And that's what you should try to feel in the Kedusha. For some of us, it might be a moment in nature. Maybe it's a birth of a child. Maybe it's a moment of connection with someone else that you just felt like was totally different than anyone else, than any other moment. That's what you're trying to feel in the Kedusha. The tradition uses this metaphor of the angels praising God on high, and that we are supposed to become like angels. They built up an entire mystical tradition around this, and that's why it was very, I think, powerful and compelling to use that metaphor. For us today, it might be imagining those peak moments in our own life. And so try to find one of those peak moments. And when you get to the Kedusha, you're like, oh, okay, I got it. That's like that amazing hike I took up Masada at sunrise, and I watched the sun cross the horizon. And so you go to that place and to that feeling, and you connect to that feeling each and every time that you say the Kedusha. The second part of the weekday Amidah is all about the things we need. These are the things that are most important in our life, our priorities. The things that are the most important things. They can be spiritual needs like knowledge, repentance, forgiveness. They can be physical, material, other needs, redemption, health, economic prosperity. Then it can move to the second section, beyond ourselves. Again, note the movement all throughout the prayers, right? Needs of the Jewish people and society as a whole. Ingathering of our dispersed. We have a people, and this prayer was evolving in the first few centuries of the Common Era, when our people had lost our homeland, had lost our capital, had lost our central place of holiness, the Beit HaMikdash, and were becoming dispersed. And so there's a prayer for really connecting to the ingathering of the dispersed, restoring a sense of justice, right? Making sure that there is justice so that the people who would do us harm do not engage in that anymore. A prayer for the righteous, which is a beautiful prayer that talks about the people who we want to single out in our tradition, our teachers, those who join the Jewish people, those who convert to Judaism, right? Those who engage in mitzvot. And so we single out groups of people who we consider to be models, to be people that are inspiring to us. We single out the Messianic period, right? That we hope that we're moving towards that period. And finally, a summary blessing, C, Shema Kolenu. This is often where I add in personal prayers about what I'm thinking about. If I'm thinking about someone who's in need of healing, right, I can add that into the healing prayer, which you find on page 38. And our Siddur gives us a language to use with a little paragraph that you can insert into the traditional prayer, where you can then insert someone's name. The closing section then is Ritzeh, right? May our prayers be accepted as they were in the Beit HaMikdash when the sacrifices were accepted. Now we don't bring physical sacrifices, we bring our kind of spiritual, the service of the heart. Then we have another prayer of thanksgiving, being grateful for all of our blessings. That's also where other holidays get inserted, like Hanukkah and Purim and Yom Ha'atzmaut and Israel's Independence Day. And finally, a prayer for peace, because every Jewish gathering ends with a notion of peace. We say that to each other when we leave, Shalom. We say that when we see each other, Shalom. We say that on Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, right? We say that, right, at the close of every service with the line, Oseh Shalom. We hope that we are engaged in peace and we're moving the world towards peace. It's also the last line of the Kaddish, which became then the last prayer, so that every minyan closes with the notion of peace. How desperate we are for a world and for our own lives to be filled with a sense of peace. There is more to say here, but I've run out of time, sadly. So next week, we'll try to pick it up at the Tafnun, at the very end, after the Amidah, and in 2 weeks, on February 4th. Thank you all for wonderful participation, wonderful questions, wonderful comments, and we'll continue the learning. There are two different theories on ask which is the 19th. One theory is in the Talmud, that they added the prayer for Israel's enemies. But most scholars don't believe that, and they believe that the one of Jerusalem got split into two. See, Numbers 14 and 15 were probably the ones that got split. Shavua Tov, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.